friends, I'm Gwen.
And I'm Jessie.
Welcome to Talk Bookish to Me, the podcast where friends get together and talk about books. Happy Monday, everyone. Today I am joined by my friend Jessie. Earlier this year, she joined Jacqueline and I for our discussion and deep dive of Grown by Tiffany D. Jackson. And I thought she pointed out such interesting things and really made me think. So I figured who better to do this book discussion with me than her. If you follow me anywhere else on the internet, you probably know Jessie too. But just in case, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Jessie, and I have a YouTube channel called Reading with Jess. You can also follow me on Instagram. It's called Reading with Jess as well. But I mostly read thrillers and some horror, and sometimes here and there some romances and things like that.
And I am going to have links to your social medias in the notes of today's show. Everybody go follow her. If you like my content, you're going to like her content. We actually know each other in real life, so we've been in each other's vlogs and all of that, which is a lot of fun, which I think makes it like episodes that I do with you are like extra special because like we're real life friends as well. So in an effort for my listeners to get to know you a little bit better before we jump into the discussion, I have 3 questions for you.
Oh boy.
So I think I know the answer to the first question.
Oh.
What's your favorite read of 2021 so far?
That would have to be, oh gosh.
I know, I'm stumping you.
I think it would have to be between 2 books. I read The Perfect Marriage by Geneva Rose earlier this year, and I've always just constantly recommended it. It went viral on TikTok. I highly recommend if you like domestic thrillers with shocking twists. I definitely check that one out. But then recently I just read Rock, Paper, Scissors by Alice Feeney and absolutely loved it. Gave it 5 stars. It really surprised me because Alice Feeney is one of those authors that everyone loves, and I never really quite got the hype. And then last year or earlier this year I read His and Hers and I was like, okay, I get it. And then this one kind of like blew me away. So between those 2, those would be my favorites so far.
Question number 2, tell me about your TBR in 3 words.
Oh, wow. Okay. So I would say thriller, hopeful, because I really don't know what I'm going to read, because I'm in like a TBR challenge in our book club that me and you are in. So it's kind of like whatever gets thrown at us. And I would say since we're in October, I would say spooky.
Nice. That's a good 3 words
Yay.
there. And then what I also find interesting, so I ask this to everybody, is like, how do you organize your books and your bookshelves?
I used to organize it all by color, but my bookshelf has really overgrown. So I actually have a separate bookshelf, which I have all of my, like, I don't even know how to describe it. I don't want to say favorites because it's not my favorites, but I have like all of my Stephen Kings, including my mom's that she's gifted me. I have my original Harry Potters, and then I have like books from my favorite authors. Like I have all the Riley Sager books. I have the Carolyn Kepnes You series. All the Chevy Stevens are over there too. I haven't read all of them, so I can't really say they're my favorites, but so that's how I kind of organize it. I try to keep my colorful one as my TBR, but there are books on there that I've read. So, and then I try to unhaul them if I didn't like them or I just know I'm not getting to them. So
it sounds like it's not like your favorite shelf, like you said, but it's like your series / authors that you have multiple books of.
Right. Yeah. And Colleen Hoover. I forgot to mention her.
Yeah, of course.
Yes,
she's on that shelf.
Gotta have Colleen Hoover.
All right, it's book discussion time. The beginning will be spoiler free for those that wanted to check in and hear our brief thoughts. I'll let you know before we hop into spoilers. So the book we're going to be discussing today, of course, The Final Girl Support Group. It was published July 13th of this summer, 2021. It's a horror novel that follows a group of heroines to die for from the brilliant New York Times bestselling author of the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, Grady Hendrix. And the author, Grady Hendrix, is an award-winning novelist and screenwriter living in New York City. He's the author of Horror Store, My Best Friend's Exorcism, We Sold Our Souls, and like I said, the New York Times bestselling novel, The Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, which is being adapted into a series by Amazon Studios. Grady also authored the Bram Stoker award-winning nonfiction book, Paperbacks from Hell, a history of the horror paperback boom of the 70s and the 80s. You can listen to free podcasts of his fiction on Pseudopod. He also does a podcast called Super Scary Haunted Homeschool. And everything about Grady Hendrix to me just drips horror, and it feels like it's like a genuine passion of his. It doesn't feel like fake or made up or just something he's like slightly dipping his toes into. Like, he's all in with horror. So my first question is, have you read any other books by Hendrix?
I actually haven't. This would be my first. I've actually checked out the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, but I actually never got around to it, and I didn't want to get charged a library fee, so I returned it.
So I have read the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, which I really enjoyed.
Okay.
And it was crazy because it's a chunkier book than I typically read. The books that I typically read are around like 300, maybe 350 pages, and that's kind of on the longer side, but this one was like almost 400 pages, and I flew through it in a day.
Wow.
I rated it 4 stars. I really liked it. It's definitely a book I could consider like picking up again and rereading.
Okay.
Loved it, thought it was funny, and the story was just really interesting as well. There were some things in there that like definitely grossed people out more than it did me, but I just thought it was a really well done story. I do have my best friend's exorcism on my TBR.
Okay.
So I am interested in that one, but none of his other backlist really intrigues me enough to worry about. Like, I'm not going to go searching for his backlist titles like some other authors that I do that for. But I will be on the lookout for like new stuff that he has coming out.
Yeah.
One thing that I heard like leading up to like us reading this for the podcast is people were like, if you like slasher movies, you're probably going to like it. If you don't like slasher movies, you're probably not going to like it. So let's just go ahead and get that out of the way. Do you like slasher movies?
I grew up watching them.
I definitely love them, but I haven't really, when I was thinking about this, I was like, I love slasher movies, but I was like, I haven't really watched that many of like the classic popular ones like Friday the 13th, Halloween, things like that. When I was a young girl, I caught like bits and pieces late at night when I would spend the night at my grandma's house, because like we would sleep in the same bed, you know, and she would watch those things. So I was still awake, so I would watch those things. But as I grew up, I just never kind of kept up with the franchises, because I'm one of those people, just like with books. I have to start at book number 1 and work my way through the series. Same. Even with authors, I like to kind of, if I've never read from them before, I like to start at the beginning of their work and progress through like in publication order, unless there's like another way you should read them. So same thing with movies. I don't think I could just jump into the new Halloween movie coming out. I mean, yes, I probably could, but me, I want to start at Halloween, just the regular plain and number 1 movie, and then watch them in order. So
Same.
I say I'm a fan, but am I really? Probably not.
Well, there's something about like the whole like 80s, 90s, like, yes, they're cheesy sometimes, and like sometimes like the sequels are just awful, but that's what makes them great about them. And then like like you, I have not watched any of the newer stuff, like any of the newer Halloweens. I think the new Rob Zombie movies were the furthest I've went.
It's not that I mind watching those movies by myself, but just because of my schedule and how busy I am, I don't have a lot of free me time. My free me time goes to reading books. So outside of that, I like to spend it with like friends, my husband, you know, family, stuff like that. And our favorite thing to do isn't sitting down and watching scary movies. I mean, I'm already behind on my normal like TV shows and movies that I watch. So slasher films have kind of taken a back seat. But I am hoping to catch some this spooky season. So let's cross our fingers for that.
Yeah. My husband is the biggest scaredy cat when it comes to movies, so he won't watch them. So I typically watch them when he's not home, and which is the big mistake, because then I can't sleep that night. But yeah, I typically have to watch them by myself because none of my like local friends watch them either. So I'm just the weird one that likes death and gore and all that stuff.
So I'm wondering if you felt like your thoughts on the book were impacted by like your knowledge or lack of knowledge of slasher films.
I think I caught a lot of movie references in this book, like way more than 1 or 2. So I was constantly comparing classic slasher movies to this book, and I think it kind of affected my enjoyment, but we'll see. What about you?
I don't think it did for me. Like I said, maybe if you did have more slasher film knowledge, it could help or hurt depending. But since I don't have like a good knowledge of the classics, or at least the references that he used in this book, it didn't really affect my enjoyment. But I think if you're like a diehard slasher fan and you've watched all the movies and you know the ins and outs and know all of the people and know all of the backstories, that could help or it could hurt. Who would you recommend this book to?
That is a great question. Personally, I feel like because I do like the classic slasher films, I don't know how I would recommend that to someone else who likes slasher films. But I think if you liked Final Girls by Riley Sager, you might like this one. But I don't know. It's kind of a hard one to like pinpoint like who specifically would like this one. But I think if you like slasher films, I don't think it's going to hurt by giving it a try.
Fans of slasher movies would like this. They're just going to obviously have to separate it that this is a book version of all those movies that you love. I think people new to horror might like this because it's not too horrifying to me, but it has enough like horror elements that I think that they would like light gore, chasing scenes, action, you know, the final girl trope. So if you like the final girl trope and you want to read about it instead of watching it on the big screen, here's your opportunity. I also say if you're a Grady Hendrix fan and you just want to read all of his books, obviously he wrote this one, you're going to want to read it.
I would also say if you are interested in horror but not like into like the supernatural paranormal type of horror, then you might like this too.
So I have mentioned several times that I'm a newbie to the horror genre, so I know I missed so many of the Easter eggs that Hendrix sprinkled throughout the story. You said you were able to pick up on references of different like movies and stuff like that. So which ones did you like pick up on?
So let me just start off by saying there's a lot of characters, so my notes could be a little bit wrong, but you have one person who the classic went camping at a summer camp and got slashed. I would say that would be Friday the 13th. Jason, if you know the reference. There was one person who the murderer was considered the ghost, and I kind of got Scream because of the ghost face reference towards it. And then you had another one who was babysitting, or like their babysitter got murdered. That kind of gives me Halloween vibes from the very beginning of Halloween. Let's see. Then you had another person who was like, had a weird thing about leather. So I was getting Leatherface, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre vibes out of that one. And then you had another person who kept referring to the Dream King, and I was getting Freddy Krueger vibes out of that one.
I absolutely missed every single reference or Easter egg. I mean, there were like, it was like reminiscent, you know what I'm saying? But I didn't like know, and I couldn't be like, oh, that's like that movie, or oh, that's that. So like I said, it goes back to what I said earlier about me being a fake fan. But I did want to share some of the Easter eggs that were included, but we'll get into that in the spoiler section. So if you're interested in that, stay tuned. But I thought this would be a fun question. What would be your top 3 essential tools that you would need as a final girl? Living out in the world now, what 3 essential tools would you need?
Oh my gosh, this is a hard question.
I'm coming with the hard questions today.
Like from the aftermath, I guess like I would definitely say like some kind of security system or surveillance type footage and things like that with where I live. I would say definitely a reliable car to get away in case something happens. And I would say my dogs, so they can bark if anyone enters the house.
I love that answer. That's such a Jessie answer, you guys don't even know. I love it. So my 3 tools would be a good nest egg of money, because I never know when I'm going to have to like get up and go somewhere. So money, a weapon of some kind, because if we get in close quarters, I may have to take somebody down. And I think, like, especially after reading this book, I need at least one person that I can trust. Whether it be like a friend or my husband or somebody that I can trust that I know is not the person out to get me. So, money, weapon, a person I can trust.
I didn't even think about a weapon. I'm just like...
Give me that card. Give me my dog.
Yep.
Give me that security system. I love it. Another thing that I like to do on this podcast, I've been doing it since the very first book discussion. I've been pairing the book with a signature cocktail, and this time is no different. I usually share what I've chosen at the end of the episode, but then I feel like if people haven't read the book yet, they're just, wanting to listen to the non-spoiler section, I'm like, this cocktail is too good to pass up. I want to share it right now. So the Final Girl Support Group signature cocktail is a s'mores campfire cocktail. I mean, come on.
It sounds so good.
Okay, number one, it looks delicious. I think it's the perfect, like, campy slasher. I mean, because when I think Final Girls, I think campy slashers. So what better pairing than a s'mores-inspired drink? I am going to have the recipe on our Instagram, so go check that out. But quickly, and another thing I like about this recipe is that you can change it up. So it calls for 2 ounces of vanilla vodka, but if you don't have vanilla vodka, use regular vodka. Mm-hmm. 2 ounces of almond milk or any preferred milk. So if you want to use eggnog instead of milk or coconut milk or just whole milk or whatever, use that. 1 ounce of Irish cream liquor like Bailey's or Carolyn's. You could also use Kahlua instead. 1 tablespoon of hot chocolate powder. Yes. And then garnished like crushed graham crackers, chocolate sauce, and marshmallows.
Oh my gosh.
So you crumble the graham crackers on a plate, you rim the glasses with the chocolate syrup, and dip the glass in the graham crackers. You shake all of the other ingredients in a shaker with ice, pour over the ice, garnish, and serve. And guys, it looks so good. I can't wait to share pictures on Instagram with you guys. Definitely check it out. And if you decide to mix up one, make sure that you tag us and let me know so I can see your creation.
I think if you toasted the marshmallow before putting in the drink, oh man.
My goodness. Can
you
imagine?
really want one.
I know. You could make these drinks and have a slasher movie night. So
that would be so cool.
So I want everybody to do that this Halloween season. We've had some fun, but now it's time to get to the nitty gritty. We'll be discussing things in depth. So expect possible spoilers ahead. All right, so let me get into those Easter eggs that I was talking about. Hendrix said, if you're a normal person, you'll read the Final Girl Support Group for the story. If you're a weirdo like me, some of it will feel vaguely familiar. That was me. It was like that vague, familiar feeling. A name here, a situation there. You aren't wrong. I figured if I was writing a book that revolved around slasher movies like Friday the 13th and Scream, then I was going to pack it in with call-outs, references, and Easter eggs. The name for Dr. Carol Elliott. So it says the 2 Dr. Carols. Dr. Carol Elliott gets her names from 2 places. First, she's named after the other famous Dr. Carol, who is Dr. Carol Clover, a professional of medieval studies at the University of California, Berkeley. She wrote the 1992 book Men, Women, and Chainsaws that first popularized the term Final Girl as the name of the female survivor in a slasher movie.
Nice.
So I thought that was super cool.
Oh, yeah.
And then the other part of her name, the other half, came from Dr. Robert Elliott, one of the worst big screen therapists of all time. Played by Michael Caine in a 1980 slasher, Dressed to Kill. Caine's Dr. Elliott turns out to be a straight, razor-wielding, cross-dressing killer called Bobby. So he combined their names to tip the hat to the woman who came up with the concept of the Final Girl, while also tipping off readers who've seen too many movies that Dr. Carol, like Dr. Robert Elliott, might have something to hide. All right, the next one is that gnome coming. And this bothered me so much because I was like, I know this is important, but I literally have no idea why. And it wasn't until I saw this provided by Grady Hendrix. So between 1975 and 1982, Canadian producers were allowed to deduct 100% of their production costs from their taxes, resulting in about 350 tax shelter films getting filmed north of the border. One of which was Bob Clark's tornado shot Black Christmas. That was in 1974, which kick-started the slasher genre. Did not know that. Since then, Canadian tax shelter movies have given us genre classics like Prom Night, 1980, and My Bloody Valentine, 1981. And I had to have at least one Canadian final girl. Enter Chrissy Mercer and her homecoming night massacre flick, Gnomecoming. There were also the Santa Claus slashers. And then, like you mentioned, he's a huge fan of the Scream franchise. And Julia is his small tribute to Neve Campbell's performance as Sidney Prescott in that series. Now, some of the names that he mentioned is in the final chapter of the book. There's like a list of people killed in the Camp Red Lake Massacre. And he said that he wants to see if you recognize where those names come from. So I looked them up. I could not do this and not know. So I have the hardcover book, and
Same.
I'm going to try to find where it was. Started on page 337 of the hardcover, and it went to 338. So it was like Jack Burrell, Brenda Jones, Marcy Standler, Edna Hockett, Julia Scaw, Amanda Shepard, and all of those characters were killed in Friday the 13th. I think the first two, maybe the first three, were the first original Friday the 13th. Like Jack Barrel, who was stabbed in the throat. Brenda was stabbed in the chest. Marcy was hit in the face with an axe. And then some of the other ones came from like later movies. But yeah, these are all people that were killed off in Friday the 13th movies and stuff like that. I was like, oh, see, I don't remember like actors' names in movies that well anyway. So when he's throwing these names at me, I'm like, who are these people? So I thought that was very, very interesting. So yeah, there's definitely Easter eggs out there for you to pick up on, some that I named, some that I didn't. But I just thought that was so interesting, like you said, how much research he put into this. So now let's get into the characters, specifically the women of the Final Girl support group: Marilyn, Adrienne, Danny, Lynette, Heather, and Julia, and the therapist, Dr. Carol. Were there any characters you specifically liked or disliked?
Personally, I was not a fan of any of them. And as I was reading listening to the audiobook, they all kind of sounded the same. So without taking notes and again, there's like a bunch of them. I think it's like 7 of them, and then including the doctor. Yeah, I actually ended up having to take notes. I would say Lynette would probably be the only character that I did like. But they all kind of sounded the same. I really didn't connect with any of them. I mean, I know I'm not a final girl, but I really didn't feel a connection between any of them. But if I had to pick, I would say Lynette. But of course, we're reading through her eyes.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I thought she was a wild character to follow.
Yes.
And she was just kind of, I don't even know. I will say I was totally freaked out by Chrissy, or Crazy Chrissy, as she was referred to in the book. She's the one where, like, she lived in that cabin in the woods or something like that. And then there was that guy, Keith, which was, like, basically, like, her lapdog. They were terrifying to me. And then she's leading Lynette through her museum. No. I would have been out of there so freaking fast. Like, no thing. And just the things that she was saying, like, it takes you to a spiritual journey.
Yeah,
I was like, girl, you're about to die. Can you please get out of there? Like, it was freaking me out. The only other character that stood out to me is Marilyn, because she just seemed so Southern to me. Like,
yes.
She was a Southern belle through and through, like pearls, sweet tea, and grits for breakfast. Let's talk about Lynette for a second. If you had to describe Lynette in 3 words, what would they be?
Paranoid,
Yep.
slightly crazy,
Yeah.
but I would say prepared, though.
Okay, my 3 words: erratic, reckless, and lonely. I mean, come on. When you have a pet plant
yes,
named Vine, that's a new level of lonely, guys.
And she would talk to the plant. I was just like...
I know. I mean, I'm a plant person. I'm a plant mom, but I don't quite get that lonely. You know, they're my plants. They are not my friends.
Well, there was the part where, like, she had to leave the apartment and she's, like, worried about her plant. I'm like, girl.
There are bullets!
He is fine.
I know. But now, on the flip side, what 3 words do you think Lynette would use to describe herself?
Self-centered. Because, like, I mean, she is worried about herself and herself only.
Mm-hmm. She proved that time and time again.
I kind of feel like she's a little arrogant, too. Like, kind of like, yes, I know how to do this, and I have a plan A and a plan B and a plan C and, like, all this other stuff. Yeah, I mean, those are the only 2 I can really think of. But, I mean, I feel like those 2 cover her completely.
Yeah. So, I think that how I would describe her and how she would describe herself completely different. So, remember, I said that she would describe herself as erratic, reckless, and lonely. I think she would describe herself as smart, cunning, and dependable, which is all like the complete opposite. And that's what I really got from her character, because in the beginning, she was all like, I watch everybody's shoes to make sure that they're not following me and all of this. And then she's like, I have this cage on my door to make sure that if they get in, that they don't get past this cage. And I have the car to get away, and I have the nest egg of money, and I have the web. And then when things really got tough, she was like a chicken running around without a head. She was like,
yes.
Oh my gosh, what do I do? I was like, girl, I thought you were prepared. Yes. I thought you were smart and dependable and cunning.
I know. I thought the same thing, because I was like, you had a plan. I mean, granted, like, all of her plans didn't really go to plan, but I was like, you should be thinking on your A game, and she wasn't.
She was a crazy character to follow, and she did get on my nerves at times, but it was like what made it such a wild ride for me was like following her. I will agree with you. Earlier you said a lot of the other characters kind of ran together. I do think that they didn't have enough differences, that it just felt like they were all lumped together. Their stories all sounded the same, and I would get them mixed up, like who was who and stuff like that. So I agree with you there. So I know the book was released in the summer, but for some reason the setting was in autumn in Los Angeles. Do you think that had any impact on the story, or did it matter to you at all?
Personally, I don't think it really mattered, but when I think of like slasher films, I think of, unless they're at like a summer camp, I think of like late summer, early autumn. So maybe that was why, but it personally didn't have an effect on me.
Yeah, it didn't impact it for me either. But I had a couple of like brief thoughts about it. So how were all of these final girls living in LA? I was just like,
yes.
I've never heard of a final girl in real life other than outside the movies. So how did this LA town, have all of these final girls?
Right.
So all of this, living in the same city. Also, wouldn't that be a bad idea to corral all of the final girls in one city? That just spells disaster in my opinion. And Marilyn was definitely Southern, but I don't remember like where she was specifically from. And I don't know or remember if they said where different characters were from, if they just like moved to LA from different places or what. The book was released in summer, but set in autumn. I thought that was a weird choice. Like you said, like campy slashers, I think summer, so why not just set it in summer? And also, I don't know, LA just didn't fit the vibe for me for some reason. I don't know.
Yeah.
And isn't autumn in LA like any other time of year, like warm and sunny? So I'm like, did you really have to say on that cool autumn day in LA? Like, what? That doesn't even make sense to me. Plot and pacing, what did you think about that?
I thought the pacing at the very beginning was kind of like all over the place. But I kind of feel like that kind of reflected on Lynette's character, because she was kind of like all over the place. But I thought the pacing was fine once it kind of like, set the scene of the story. As we got to know the characters and things like that, I felt like the pacing was better. But I felt like at the very beginning, it was just like, okay, I feel like I'm thrown into this way too quickly.
I was kind of the opposite. I did think the pacing was great. A tiny bit at the beginning to get us started, but the action pretty much started right away once Lynette got back to her apartment. I hate when books dump a bunch of information and characters on me at the beginning. I just think it's too much. They did introduce them like quickly, briefly to me, but they didn't say like, this is Marilyn and she's from this and this is what she looks like and this is her backstory. I hate when books do that.
Yeah.
Because I just feel like at that point, I don't know who's important and who's not. So I'm keeping all of that information in. And the way this set it up is it just really told me about Lynette. Like Lynette's the important character and these other characters may or may not come into play. So I appreciate how the character and their bios and their backstories were included rather at the beginning or as the story progressed instead of that huge like info dumping in the beginning. I also really enjoy when books go like back and forth on who done it. And I love that because especially if it's a believable back and forth. If I'm just like, you know it's not this person. But in this one, they went back and forth like, oh my gosh, it's Dr. Carol. And then they were like, oh no, it's one of the guys that got out of prison or whatever. And then they started like expecting like each other. And then like, I just love that because I was like, oh my gosh, it is someone got out of jail. Or, oh my gosh, there's a copycat killer. Or, oh my gosh, it's Dr. Carol. Or, you know, I really did have, every time it switched and said something, I was like, oh, it totally is.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm very gullible when it comes to like I guess like who done it like switches a lot. I'm like, oh, you're totally right. It's so them. I knew it from the beginning. I'm very gullible when it comes to reading stuff like that. Even with movies too. I love when it switches, but sometimes it's a little bit too much when it does it too much. But I feel like this book didn't overdo it.
As far as the writing goes, one thing I heard from other readers and reviewers is that this one didn't feel like classic Grady Hendrix. I'm personally not sure what they mean by that because it's only my second Hendrix novel and this is your first.
Yeah, I don't have anything to compare it to.
Yeah. So from what I've read, and I basically have picked up two main things about this author. Like I said before, he's a massive horror fan. And number two, he's extremely funny. And this is based on things that I've read online, videos I've seen, like I said, other readers and other reviewers, and the books that I have read. Obviously, this is reminiscent of a classic slasher horror, usually seen in movies. So I can definitely see the inspiration. But it wasn't quite as lighthearted and funny as I remember the Southern Book Club's guide being. It did have some hilarious one-liners, though. So what did you think about just, like, the writing in general?
I had heard that Grady Hendrix is funny, and I didn't really catch that on this book, so I was like, oh, I guess I'm not...
Funny.
Yeah, I guess I'm not getting the jokes, but then I'm glad you said that because you felt the same way. But, I mean, I liked his writing. I liked the references and things like that. But yeah, I mean, I think his writing was fine. I definitely want to pick up other things by this author. Definitely. I think the Southern Book Club's Guide to Slaying Vampires, that's such a long title. I think I'm going to pick that one up next. Not sure when, but I'm curious to keep seeing his writing. I think his writing's great from what I can tell.
Yeah, it's funny that he had books come out before that one, but that's the one that like people really gravitated to for some reason. So
yeah, I felt like it went very popular last year.
Yeah, definitely. So now we're going to get into some of our favorite quotes or passages, if you have any. And I just wanted to share like kind of two of those funny one-liners. So in my book, like I said, I have the hardcover. The first one is on page 13. And it says, "Don't you dismiss me, Heather Explode. I've handled crap you can't even dream about. I've dealt with some higher level astral bullshit that would make you drop a log in your satin panties." And I was like, oh my gosh, that was just like so funny to me. And the other one is on page 117. Let me find that. "Let me tell you what I'm going to do," Heather says. "I'm going into that party to speak to my very good motherfucking friend, Miss Marilyn Blake, who pays your motherfucking salary. If you get in my way, I'm going to jump in that pool, whip out my tits, and let this bunch of charity Barbies get an eyeful of what natural bees look like." And I was like, yes. So I was expecting more of that because I like I said, it's been a couple years since I've read the Southern Book Club's guide, but I just remember more of that. Those like one-liners that come out of nowhere and you're like, what?
I didn't really have any passages that kind of stuck out other than that one. But when they would banter, like, although they kind of seemed very similar when they spoke, their banter to one another was hilarious. And I was just like in the beginning, they're talking about like cookies not being served at the meeting. And I'm like, you guys have been through so much and you're bantering over cookies not being at the support group meeting.
So throughout the book, there are several media pieces. Some seem to pertain to the main story. Some do not. Like I said, they could have been those references that I just like wasn't getting.
Yeah.
But one stood out and I thought it would be interesting to bring it up as food for thought. So on page 305, like I said, in my book, the hardcover edition, the US hardcover edition, I should say, it's one of the media pieces and it says, "But what does it say about us that so much of the entertainment we consume is about killing women?" I want you to think about that. How is the murder of women fun? You go to the big new thriller, you finish your popcorn, you go out for dinner, you talk about the plot twists with your friends. It's just another part of your evening out. But no one brings that woman safely home. Her body is left back there on the screen while everyone goes on with their lives. Let's think about what that means. Let's talk about what's wrong with us. And I think it's interesting to think about. I thought about it, and I just want to ask you, what does it say about us that so much of the entertainment we consume is about killing women? And why do you think the women in peril trope and slasher films have been so popular over the years? And what does it say about us as a society?
That's a hard one. I guess when I'm thinking of like the old slasher films, it's always the one girl or one woman that is out there. I mean, it's not always women who are out there. There are with a camp, like there's guys in there too, but they typically are not the final person ever. There's always some kind of like backstory as to why. It could be like a crazy boyfriend, or it could be like Michael Myers. It's actually like the brother that's out to get his sister and things like that. I'm not sure specifically why it's always women that are the ones that are getting killed, but it could just be something how society pictures us women being vulnerable and like easy targets. And I'm kind of glad that the women are not the easy targets and there's at least one girl that makes it out alive.
Yeah. I look at it like two different perspectives. I look at it, like you said, like, is this men writing these movies, or these screenwriters writing these movies, like saying like women are the, vulnerable ones. They're the ones that can be caught up in these situations. But then why are they the final girl? Because they outsmarted everybody else. Mm-hmm. So it's also showing that they can be smart and cunning and dependable and crafty and make it out that they're stronger than they appear. Mm-hmm. Also, as an actress, being the final girl, you have the most screen time. So that's pretty awesome.
True.
I would
Very
think.
true.
As far as like leaving the girl behind on screen, like I'm someone that separates fact from fiction. So I never think I'm contributing to this societal thing that Hendrix is alluding to here. Maybe because I do separate it means that I am directly the person he's talking about. However, I do believe that maybe female deaths are remembered more than the male deaths. And that's also worth thinking about. So I looked up some of the stats and I just went with the two Friday the 13th movies, Friday the 13th and Friday the 13th Part 2. So in Friday the 13th, there are 4 female deaths in that movie and there are 5 male deaths. In Friday the 13th Part 2, there are 3 female deaths and 7 male deaths.
Wow.
So that's just an example. So like you said, in those campy slasher movies, there's guys there too and they're dying just as much. So I almost do think that it's good that the women are getting these roles that are the better roles, quote unquote roles, because they're the one that people are talking about when they leave the theater. So as like an actress, if you look at it from an actress point of view, you're like, hey, they're getting the best role. And then if you're thinking like, who is writing these stories, they're showing women as being the powerhouses to get out of these situations and survive these crazy things. And then, like I said, it's just the women that people are remembering over the guys, even though guys are dying more. So
Yeah.
I think it's all food for thought, definitely. Feel free to chime in on Instagram and let us know what you think about that. I just thought it was really, really interesting.
Yeah. And actually, after you said that, like, I don't think the movies or the stories would be as good if they had a final boy or guy, or like, it just wouldn't have the same impact.
Plot twist, since we were mentioning plot twists, I love talking about plot twists. I mean, that's like, we read thrillers, guys, so we love it. So which plot twists did you see coming? Which ones were shocking?
So, like you said, it switches quite a bit. But I would say the therapist's son was shocking to me, because I was like, there's no way that this, like, because he was like barely, he was like 20, 21 or something like that.
Yeah.
I was like, there's no way that, I mean, I see how it could happen, but the fact that he was in on it and like was helping and things like that, like, that's just mind blowing. But then, like, after I thought about it, I was like, oh yeah, I should have seen that coming too.
Yeah, I was definitely shocked that Stephanie, that poor little defensive Stephanie, was in on it. And then, like you said, the therapist's son. I shouldn't have been shocked, but I didn't suspect him at all. And it's like, maybe if I watched more slasher films, I would know it's always the person that's helping you out.
Yeah.
That is part of it. So I was definitely shocked by that. I was also shocked that it was Lynette that was writing a book, giving away all of this backstory about all of these people. I was just like, wow, okay, why would you do that and then put it in a vulnerable state where other people could find it? Like, I don't know. I was shocked by that too.
Stephanie, like, I kind of saw that coming a little bit, because I've always been told, like, it's always the quiet ones.
Oh man, I didn't see it coming, because she was playing it like so good, and like, poor me, like, I'm injured, help me. And Lynette was like helping her so much. And then when they went to Chrissy's house, she's like telling Stephanie, like, you stay in the car, I'm gonna go in, but if I don't come back in like so many minutes, you have to like do whatever she told her to do. So about the ending, what did you think about the ending?
It was just okay. I felt like once everything was revealed, I was just like, okay. It kind of all makes sense, like, why this is happening, why, you know, person A and person B are doing this. And it just, like, I don't know. I felt like it was just fine. I wasn't like that blown away. 'Cause some of the, like, twists, and again, I'm very vulnerable, but like, it also wasn't that shocking to me. I'm not vulnerable, I'm very gullible. Yes. But I also wasn't that shocked either, because like throughout the whole book I was like, okay, I think it's this person, and I think it's this person, but I think it's this person who's doing it for this person. Like, I don't know, my mind's crazy when I think of who could have done it.
Yeah, you're like, whatever. And I do think it was a little let down how they kind of like revealed everything.
Yeah.
I do feel like Skye and Stephanie were equally responsible and to blame, even though Lynette claims that Skye groomed Stephanie to do his bidding. Stephanie, like, when she was like behind bars or in that mental hospital or like whatever, she made it clear that she knew what she was doing. I think that the ending did, and it took me a while to come to this revelation, that it kind of does read like a new slasher film. The one where like Stephanie claims she's cured, that the final girl support helped her, and then she's released and she's back at it again. I'm like, how crazy would that be?
Right.
All right, so do you have any final thoughts, like anything else you want to touch on?
Well, like I had told you when I first started reading this, I thought it was really interesting that the narrator for the audiobook was actually an actress that played on the first, what was it? The Friday the 13th movie. Adrienne King is the narrator. I had no clue, and a subscriber of mine told me that, and I was like, what? No way. And I thought that was kind of cool. But also, I thought the articles, mixed media sections were interesting, but also I felt like it was a little bit too much. I was like, I really don't care about this. But I also like the titles for each chapter. I kind of feel like they also represented like some of the movie references, like A New Nightmare and stuff like that. Like, I thought those were really, really cool.
Yeah, that was. I think the other final girls, like the women, pretty much they're not girls. They're women now.
Yeah.
Could have been more fleshed out as characters and separated their pasts a bit more. Because I didn't have those like references from the slasher films. I couldn't really like separate it in my mind, and they seemed to all run together, and I couldn't like tell them apart. The last thing I want to touch on is the last page of the book. It's like the wrap up portion. I really liked the last paragraph. I think it sums up Lynette's character so well. So I'm going to go ahead. It says, ever wonder what happens to those final girls after all their plans go belly up and all their weapons fail, after their defenses crumble and they've been shot in the head, after they've trusted the wrong people, made the wrong choices, and opened themselves up to the worst possible moments, after their lives are ruined and they're left at 38 years old with nothing in the bank, no kids, no lover, and nothing to their name but a couple of ghosts and a handful of broken down friends. I know what happens to those girls. They turn into women and they live. I really do think that that sums up her character, and I think that she kind of came full circle realizing that I think I have everything together. I think I have all of my, plans in place. And then she saw that, oh, when the going gets tough, I have no idea what I'm doing, but that's okay. I'm still going to get through it. Really, really liked that. So I did love that final paragraph. However, that one-liner right above that, I don't know why I closed my book because I was going to read that too, that says, Stephanie, I say, welcome to the Final Girl Support Group. That should have been the final line. Time you don't really know like what they're doing, like leading up to them bringing them in to see Stephanie. You think she's behind bars, that they're just there to say, ha ha, we caught you, we're the final girls, or at least I did. So if then they would have had that paragraph where Lynette comes full circle, like I realize it, I know what happens to those girls, they turn into women and they live. And then if they would have said, Stephanie, welcome to the Final Girl Support Group, I would have lost my mind.
I feel like it would have had more punch to it.
Yes, exactly. So it dulled that great line and putting it before, because you're like, now I still have this paragraph to read down here. Yeah. So it should have been flip-flopped, but I will excuse it. It kind of
like, if it was flip-flopped, it kind of would have left like on a cliffhanger almost.
So what's your rating? How did you enjoy the book overall? And is there any other book or movie that you would compare it to?
Okay. So I have been debating on this, but unfortunately I'm going to have to give it a 2-star. I wasn't really a fan. And honestly, I think the narrator is like one of the biggest reasons. I really could not stand the narration on audiobook for it. I tried to read it physically. I feel like I was getting even more confused with the characters and their dynamic and what was going on. So I went back to the audiobook. So maybe if you read it physically without the audiobook, you may enjoy it. Also, I was constantly thinking of all of the movie references, and I kind of felt like I was kind of losing the originality of the story, but I can respect Hendrix's, I guess, like salute to all the classic films and things like that. I don't know. I kind of wanted something a little bit more original, but I'm going to blame most of my low rating on the narrator of the audiobook. So,
although you make a really good point about that it was, I mean, like I said, I don't have those references, so I wasn't picking up on that. And maybe that's why I enjoyed it more than you did. True. Because I feel like if I do pick up on things in books, like if you pick up on something that annoys you, it's something you've dealt with before and you're like, that's not right. Or, or you're trying to make all these connections. So that's a very good point.
Yeah. I mean, I think I would have enjoyed it if I started physically. But also, I was trying to make sure I got this done in time. Because I also just got back from a beach trip. So I was trying to make sure I didn't bring the book with me, because I know I can't read in the car. So I felt like I was putting it down and picking it back up and switching the narrator and things like that. So, but as far as like books and movies, as far as books, I would definitely say any of the Final Girl tropes. The only one I can think of is Final Girls by Riley Sager. But also, I think you might also like The Last Time I Lied by Riley Sager, because it's got that campy slasher type vibe or like disappearance things. So I think you would enjoy that. And then as far as movies, any of the 80s, 90s classic movies, my personal favorite is the Nightmare on Elm Street. I don't know what it is, but I love Freddy Krueger. I think his character is so interesting in the dynamics. But that one's my favorite.
I also really struggled with my rating. I didn't love it, but I didn't hate it. There were things that I liked and things that I didn't, which typically means 3 stars for my rating. But I also feel like 3 stars wasn't reflecting how much I did enjoy it. So I'm going to go with 3.5 stars for this one. And it took me a long time to come to that decision. Even my husband was getting sick of me. He was like, just rate it, whatever. Like, who cares? I was like, I care. The people care. So yeah, I'm giving it 3.5 stars. I did overall enjoy it. I would recommend it to readers who also enjoy slasher movies and maybe someone new to horror that wants action and some gore, but not too much. I don't have any good movies that I would compare it to, but it definitely has me wanting to watch some of those classic 80s slasher films that it references. But overall, I enjoyed it. Not as much as the Southern Book Club's Guide, though. So this is number 2 for me so far. That concludes our discussion of the Final Girls Support Group by Grady Hendrix. It also happens to be the last book discussion of the year. Thanks for joining me today, Jessie. It's always a pleasure chatting about books with you.
Thank you for having me. I love coming on here.
Goal to have 4 new book discussions next year, and I already have a few books in mind. Follow me on Instagram at Talk Bookish Podcast, and you'll be the first to know which book discussions I'll be doing next. If you'd like to be considered as a special guest in an upcoming episode, fill out the guest interest form found on Instagram at Talk Bookish Podcast or email me at talkbookishpodcast@gmail.com. As always, I appreciate all listener feedback. Leave a review and there's a chance I'll share the review on Instagram. Reviewing the podcast, sharing it with friends and family, and tuning in bi-weekly for new episodes helps the podcast grow. If you'd like to suggest a topic, you know where to find me. Don't forget to check out the notes for links to the book, the author's website, and of course, links to Jessie's social media accounts. Until next time, happy reading!